So Pro Football Focus has 3 ACC quarterbacks in their top 10 for next year. But how bad did they screw this list up?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we'll talk some hoops as well. How many ACC teams are going to make the NCAA tournament, and why is it so disappointing compared to the last few years? Let's start off, though. Kenton Gibbs, by the way, he's from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. Pro Football Focus has their top 10 quarterbacks list for 2025. We'll talk about big picture reactions, but also ACC specific. So you've got 3 ACC quarterbacks who made the cut, actually 5 from the SEC. So the ACC, the conference of quarterbacks, is a little bit behind based on their preseason projections, with Cade Klubnik coming in at number 1 in the nation, Carson Beck at number 3, Kevin Jennings from SMU at number 10. That's who makes their cut. You agree with all those? Should anyone be ranked differently?
I can't believe a world where a quarterback who threw 3 interceptions, 2 of which were called back, but 1 of which ended the game against Notre Dame, ends up being on this list as a top 5 quarterback.
Old Drew Aller at number 4.
PU! That brother stinks. Now, everybody else, I do feel like, for the most part, they're right where they need to be. I mean, Cade Klubnik took massive leaps forward at the end of last year compared to not only, the previous year before that, but literally the first half of the season to the second half of the season, it looked like 2 different guys out there. Or really not even half of the season. It was like pre-Georgia, post-Georgia. It was pre-Kirby and post-Kirby. Cade looked like the man after that game. He dominated with his legs, with his arm. He did it all for Clemson. And so, that one makes sense. Sam Leavitt makes sense. Carson Beck there. Again, I'm not the biggest fan, but he belongs, because who else are you going to put there? Who else are you going to put there is the question, right?
Garrett Nussmeier put up big numbers last year, and he's ranked 2 spots behind. I don't want to try to debunk the Beck thing at number 3 because I like it, but Nussmeier put up big numbers last year at LSU.
Here's the thing: if you drop Drew Aller out of this and you shift Beck and Nussmeier, I'm not mad at it.
Okay,
I'm not like, that's not one of those things I'm committed to in a meaningful way. Another guy that's on this list, I'm like, what did he do? How did he earn this? Arch Manning. What?
Well, you know why he's on there. I mean, 2 reasons. 2 reasons. Number 1, the family tree. Number 2,
right,
he's a horn. Longhorns.
You're not wrong, but I mean, Donno, if I tell you the teams that he played against, you literally would not believe me. And when I say, like, you would not believe me, I'm not kidding at all. Would you be interested in some UTSA football, perhaps?
Roadrunners. I wouldn't be interested. No, I would not.
Well, maybe I could interest you in a little Warhawk football, a little ULM football. What do you think about that?
I'm good. I'll pass.
Okay. Well, so far, we have the biggest chunk of Arch Manning stats in those 2 games. But you know what? I saved the best for last, Donald. I saved the squad. We've got ULM, we got UTSA. What if I told you he put up big numbers against the SEC team?
Oh, tell me more.
The mighty, the great, the indefatigable Mississippi State Bulldog. What's the thinking? What's the thinking? Does that interest you? No?
I mean, a little bit more than UTSA, but no, not much.
Oh, okay. Well, against ULM, 50% completion percentage, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns.
Ooh.
I don't. What are we doing there? DJ Lagway absolutely belongs. Tommy is an interesting one. At his best, I could see.
Hold on. I don't want to be that guy, because I know, because obviously I'm a Miami guy. I saw DJ Lagway. It was his first ever appearance in college last year. Threw an interception to Miami's worst defensive back when he was laying up. But here's the thing, Kenton, I know there's all this DJ Lagway mystique, but the guy threw 12 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, and he threw for 1,800 yards and change. Let's not pretend he's put in this full resume where everyone knows for sure that DJ Lagway is the second coming. Has he shown some flashes? Absolutely. But if you talk about, and actually Lagway's probably played against better teams than Arch Manning has, I'll give him that. But Lagway doesn't have this great full resume. I mean, the guy's played in a handful of games, and he looked okay.
Can I ask you a question, Donno?
Yeah.
Name me any one of DJ Lagway's receivers that's going to hit their name called in its upcoming draft. Any one of them.
Yes. Who? Oh man, I can't. I hold on. If you let me pull up Florida stat. Hold on.
Hey, listen. Take your time with that.
Hold on.
But that's my point. I don't
need long.
You got multiple guys on that.
Elijah
Texas
Badger
team.
and Eugene Wilson. Boom.
Yeah,
and I know Wilson missed some time. Badger had a good year. Elijah Badger had a good year there.
And here's the thing. You are probably right. Both of those guys their names will be called at some point, not early enough to go up there and shake hands and hug Goodell, but their names will be called eventually. Texas, on the other hand, you're not going to have to wait around long to hear. And not just wide receiver, the running backs that they had, the offensive line that they had a full complement of ball players over there. So, the situation was a little different. Sark was supposed to go to the playoffs. LinkedIn Billy was supposed to get fired, so it's a little different. You know what I mean?
I'm just saying, though, because there's all this DJ Lagway mystique. And so when you bring his name up, I think people who just assume, he threw for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns to 3 interceptions last year. The guy threw for 1,822 yards, 12 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Doesn't have this rich he's got some signature wins, but doesn't have the resume you think he has at this point.
Here's the thing, Donno. You're going to make me say the thing that I don't want to say that we got to say. We all know that lists like this are meant to get clicks, okay? We all know that DJ Lagway and Arch Manning are going to get the clicks. That's saying, John Mateer, may I interest you in some Mateer?
He should be on this list, Mateer. I agree. John Mateer should be on this top 10.
And here's the thing. I don't disagree with that at all. The only problem is going into next year, Mateer is going to be in a new offense, which people greatly downplay how much that impacts guys. I think that he's a phenomenal quarterback. If you ask me, Kenton, will he be one of the top 10 next year? I have said repeatedly, and I stand by, it's always tough to have one-year rentals at quarterback. The position that has to have timing with everybody. He has to time the pitch right. He has to time the push pass right. He has to time the dig route right. He has to time the bang eight the correct way. It's very different going from the wide receivers I was familiar with, the pass catch I was familiar with, and the playbook I was familiar with to something totally different to where, yes, an in is an in is an in, but they may call it a different thing. They may call that, this is the Ohio scheme here. Well, over there, they call it the Lancer. What? Wait, what? What do you mean? It's the same thing. So, I can interest you in some John Mateer. You can interest me in some John Mateer. I like it. I like to see him be good next year. I just think the situation is a little different based on the fact that Oklahoma's got who coming back a receiver and a new quarterback and a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah. Well, okay. The point you just brought up, I think, weighs very large because I've got something to say about the placement of the ACC quarterbacks on this list. Plus, are they leaving anybody out, Kenton? Should anybody else from the ACC be on here? Because the conference of quarterbacks only has 3 out of the 10. You want to keep it locked. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Guys, I'm only getting started with TurboTax. Folks, it is tax season. I know we're all working on them, but don't work too hard, guys, because taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation, an expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. Kick your feet up, guys. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out our other shows. Kenton, Gibbs, and Grayson Boone do an awesome job on Locked On Wolfpack. I've got the Tar Heels tonight in basketball. Depending on when you guys watch this, the game may already be over or the game is about to start, depending on when you guys listen to this episode. So I'm rooting for the Pack. That's like my adopted second team, thanks to Kenton's influence. And Kenton, Miami's got Florida State in basketball tonight.
Yeah.
I know these aren't the best versions of Miami versus FSU, but it always means something in this rivalry. And I know Matthew Cleveland on Miami, who transferred from Florida State a couple seasons ago, has been putting up big numbers, leading Miami in scoring this year. He always has something extra to play for. Usually doesn't play that well against his former team, but maybe tonight is the night that he lets this loose. But sticking with this conversation on top 10 quarterbacks. So you've got, let me run through the whole list for everybody. Top 10 quarterbacks for the 2025 season, according to Pro Football Focus. So this is very analytics based, which is PFF's thing. They got Cade Klubnik of Clemson at number 1, Sam Leavitt, Arizona State at 2, Carson Beck at Miami 3, Drew Aller, Penn State 4, Garrett Nussmeier, LSU 5, Arch Manning 6. And you talked about Arch Manning's resume, Kenton. Arch Manning is also second in preseason Heisman odds. So there's a lot of hype. I'm sure that has a lot to do with the oil money over there in Austin. They're all throwing their money on Arch to win the Heisman. DJ Lagway at Florida, number 7. Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt, number 8. And by the way, Diego Pavia, I understand that there's mystique there because Vanderbilt had like a nice Cinderella season. They beat Alabama. They were bowl eligible, which is big for Vanderbilt. And they beat Alabama last year. Pavia played great, of course, in that game. Diego Pavia was 81st in passing last year, Kenton. Like 81st in passing. So, the mystique.
But he said, Vandy, we're turd. He said it.
Yeah.
It went viral. He said, Vandy, we're effing turd.
Yeah.
Again, this
went viral.
The aura is exceeding the actual play in this one.
Well, and Nico as well in Tennessee. Like, it's not as if he was the driving force in Tennessee's college football playoff appearance last year. But Nico Iamaleava, I always struggle. I think everyone struggles. His mom.
I was just about to say, everybody struggles. Yeah, everybody struggles with Nico. But I will say, 19 touchdown passes to 5 picks.
Not great.
Not exactly worth that $8 million a year or whatever the number is that they said he's getting. Not exactly cutting the mustard there.
Then you got Kevin Jennings, LSU at number 10. He's the third ACC. Now the ACC only has 3, but they do have 2 in the top 3. Now when you were talking about like Cade Klubnik, a big reason why he's there, because I don't necessarily think Cade Klubnik is the best quarterback in the country, but I do value the continuity and the fact that he's going into his super senior season and that he builds off a good year from last year. Clemson brings most of their supporting cast back. You've got the continuity from the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator, the same quarterback. So while I don't think Cade Klubnik is the most talented quarterback, I can go with you on ranking him at the top. And it's interesting, Kenton, and hopefully Carson Beck proves me right, because I think he can have a really good season behind Miami's offensive line and all that. But out of these 10, Carson Beck is the only transfer on the list.
Yeah.
You notice that? So when you talk about the value of continuity, there's only one transfer in this top 10 list, and that's Carson Beck. But you know what? A lot of the quarterbacks who performed well last season, including Cam Ward, including Dylan Gabriel, they were transfers. So it's not like there's any reason a transfer can't necessarily go and catch lightning in a bottle at their new spot.
I don't think that there's reason to believe they can't be very good at their new spot, but I think it's a little I think we're misleading the people a bit by not giving the full context. Cam Ward was a 1-year rental. The one up in Oregon, he was there for multiple years before he fully got to be the guy he was in this final year. I'm not saying that, hey, everybody needs to be 3 years at their new spot to figure it out. But look at Joe Burrow year 1 to year 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's plenty of guys like that.
Gabriel was only there 1 year. He was at Oklahoma before that. He was at UCF, Oklahoma, and just the 1 year at Oregon.
Oh, okay. I thought he was at Oregon the year before that. Apologies. That's on me. That's on me, fans. Hey, y'all are right. I don't know anything like y'all always tell me. But in all seriousness, I think that those two are much more of the outliers than the norms. Because you look at quarterbacks who were really good at their last stops, and then they transferred, and it was like, who is this young man that we are watching? What is this? Or it took him multiple years to come along. If we want to stick with the ACC, Jordan Travis at Florida State, look at who he was later in his time as opposed to the first year he was there. If you want to talk about a 1-year guy that floundered in his new spot, Devin Leary going from being a ACC preseason player of the year to complete obscurity virtually at Kentucky. And I'm not taking a shot at that young man and say, oh, he's terrible, he's a bust, he's whatever. But statistically speaking, it does not go well for 1-year rentals more often than not. So that's not necessarily like it's impossible to do. But if you look at the guys who have had success in their 1 year in a new spot, those guys, Dylan Gabriel may be the first one that's not talked about in like a top 5 draft pick kind of way. Everybody else, you look at Cam Newton years ago. He was the number 1 draft pick. You look at Justin Fields, who was great in his first year. He's a guy that ended up being a number 2 overall pick behind Trevor Lawrence. You look at Cam Ward, a guy that we all know he's going to be somewhere in that top 5. He's not making it out of the top 5. Although I have heard that there are character concerns there. They should let him slide to about 28. I just think that nobody in the first 27 picks, I think everybody in the first 27, he's a bad guy, that Cam Ward. Have you seen his hair? He just looks very unprofessional. He doesn't look quarterbacky enough to me. So let him slide down to 28.
Hold on. Let me guess who has that 28th pick. Is it your Detroit Lions? Are they picking 28th?
What? Donno, that's not important. That's not important at all. I don't know.
By the way, it reminds me of, I know that this was certainly before your time, even like 2 years before my time, but as a lifelong Miami Dolphin fan, I know all the stories. Dan Marino was drafted. I think he was the very last pick of the first round. And there were like some, drug rumors, like, oh, he might have been too much on the wacky tobacco. And a lot of people think Don Shula started that rumor to make sure that Dan fell to the final pick of the first round.
All I'm saying is GMs need to do their due diligence on that young man. I'm joking. He's a fantastic young man by all accounts. I'm sure he's going to be happy with wherever he goes in that top 5. But in all seriousness, being a transfer guy that plays well in your first year instantly puts you at a level where it's like, oh my God, he's a man amongst boys for a reason, because it's not an easy ordeal. It's just not.
The latest, by the way, on this sidebar we're on, the latest report that I saw about Cam Ward, and like you said, I've seen him, most of the mock drafts at this moment have him going number 1 to the Titans. I've seen a few mock drafts that have him fall in a few spots. But the latest rumor that I heard today was that the New York Jets might actually be trying to put together a trade package to trade into number 1 to get Tennessee's pick and draft Ward number 1. And obviously the Jets both teams in New York need quarterbacks. The Jets and the Giants are quarterback hungry. So again, you don't believe anything this time. When you start hearing reports about trades, smoke screens, fake news, who knows what to believe, but that's the latest thing I saw out there on Ward.
I mean, Donno, what type of guy do you want, right? You can have a Heisman winner that plays both sides of the ball. You could have a quarterback that comes from NFL Hall of Fame stock, or you can have a guy that quit at halftime on his team in a bowl game.
Here you go again.
Leave him alone. Let him fall. Let him
slide to 28.
Let him take a long slide. Don't worry, Brad Holmes. I got you. Let him take a long slide to think about it in the green room. Think about his mistakes. He needs time to do it.
Absolutely shameless. So going back to this top 10 quarterbacks list for next year. So again, you've got Cade Klubnik of the ACC at 1, Cam Ward at 3, Kevin Jennings of SMU at 10. If you could put, Kenton, one more ACC quarterback onto this list, if you could slide one more into that top 10, who would it be?
Haynes King, easy. Haynes King has got to be the guy.
You're right.
I mean, that to me is the biggest indicator that this list, what are we kind of doing here? Because Haynes King has been not just a driving force, he has been the engine to almost every Georgia Tech win over the past couple of years. Right. Don't get me wrong. Love some Jamal Haynes. He and that offensive line deserve a ton of respect. Singleton, I've talked about him ad nauseum in terms of that man is a burner supreme. He is Lightning McQueen in his prime. You see him, you don't see him. He's gone. But there has to be a straw that stirs the drink. And he does it in such a unique way. He is a guy that will do whatever it takes. He couldn't throw the ball because his right arm was jacked up. So what did he do? Ran the ball 20 times. What the hell type of logic is that? Oh, I'm so hurt I can't throw it. But I'm going to throw my body at 300-pounders. What? That young man deserved to be on that list.
It reminded me of different styles of quarterbacks, but I don't know if you were old enough to watch like the Byron Leftwich broken leg game where he basically he was hopping on one leg and
the offensive line was carrying him around and Marshall and all that. Yeah, I remember.
I remember watching that game live. I'm like, this dude is not human. When Byron Leftwich was at Marshall like 20 years ago, but I remember that game like it was last year. It was insane.
Man, I've been a football junkie from out the womb, and that was one of those things. I was just like, wait, do offensive linemen always carry their guy like that? Did they win the game? What? Oh, he's hurt. He's hurt. Yeah. This is crazy.
They had to carry him to the line of scrimmage. Unbelievable stuff. We'll shift our focus to hoops when we come back. So, all right, the experts are pretty much at a consensus as to how many ACC teams will make the NCAA tournament. And actually, they're at a consensus on exactly who they are. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Thanks for making us your first listen and your first watch today. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He is Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We are Locked On ACC. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball. Isaac Shade and Andy Patton, this is their time to shine, folks, as we get closer to the conference tournaments, the big dance coming up next month. Isaac Shade, Andy Patton will have you covered on everything college basketball. So, Kenton, bracketology and the experts out there like Joe Lunardi from ESPN, who's Mr. Bracketology, Andy Katz from NCAA.com, USA Today. They're pretty much all in agreement at the moment that there are going to be 4 teams from the ACC who make the NCAA tournament, and they're all in agreement as to who they are. I think there maybe could be wiggle room as to who gets that final spot. I'm not completely ruling out SMU although SMU lost a big head-to-head to Wake Forest over the weekend, which could be a deciding factor on which one of those gets in. But Lunardi from ESPN has Duke getting in as a number 1 seed. Not surprise anyone. Clemson getting in as a number 6 seed. Louisville getting in as a number 7 seed. And then they have pretty much all the experts have Wake Forest getting in as a number 11 seed, which would be having them have to play a play-in game. Last at-large team would play in a play-in game. So those are the 4 that they've got. And you actually did the research before the show on how many teams the ACC has gotten in the tournament for the last several years. It's been on kind of a downward tumble, but if we only get 4 in, Kenton, that would be a low in I don't know how long.
It would be a low since COVID canceled the NCAA tournament. Maybe longer before then, but I know at least then 2021 we had 7, 2022 5, 2023 5, and 2024 was 5 as well. So to now sit here and see potentially expanding the conference, adding more teams, and still getting less in. In. That's it's. I will say this in the ACC's defense: as much as the SEC gets love for cannibalizing itself, the ACC never gets in football. The ACC never gets that same type of love in basketball. When historically, even as of recently, we see time and time again all of these schools from the ACC, last year a 10 seed from the ACC, some group of jerks from Raleigh or something like that, got into the Final Four. Who did they play in the Elite Eight? A Duke team that everybody said, oh, that Filipowski kid's a little soft. The McCain kid's always doing TikToks. They don't know who they are. They don't have the toughness. And yet they got beat by another ACC team in the Elite Eight, and Hubert Davis has been to a Final Four with that Tar Heels team. So, the reality is simple to me. I look at this and I say, I get it. The computers are the computers, and we don't have that bias that it's a committee that kind of gets to pick arbitrarily. But it does seem like the ACC always outperforms the amount of teams it gets in almost every year to a high degree, to where it's like, all right, maybe this should be considered a little bit.
Who would you say in the ACC this year have been the biggest underachievers? I mean, would it be, and I know even last year the expectations weren't that high, but they had that Cinderella to the Final Four. Is it NC State? Is it UNC would be a more obvious choice? Syracuse has been shockingly bad this year. Like that's probably the list, right, of the biggest underachievers this year. Virginia,
here's the thing, right? Virginia has the excuse of our coach quit right before the season started. That is a very valid reason to say, hey, we knew that things were going to be tough. When I look at teams and I say, all right, who has underachieved the most of all the teams that were expected to be something good, I'd have to say it's UNC. You have to go there because you're returning a conference player of the year. Yes, losing Armando Bacot, he was a walking double-double and all that good stuff, but you're returning RJ Davis, you're returning Elliot Cadeau, you're returning all of these parts that people are like, hey, they're going to be better this year. Yeah, there are some questions in the front court, but the ACC's having a down year anyway. They'll have their way. And then to be a team that's looking like you're NIT bound when, people predicted you to be, hey, after Duke, who's next? UNC has to be in that conversation. Have they been in that conversation? Not at all. You could say NC State is disappointing. NC State lost its top 3 scorers from last year, or everybody outside of Jaden Taylor in terms of top scorers from last year. What did you expect? You look at Mo Diarra, who was referred to as Ramadan Mo for the way that he ate nothing but glass. He fasted properly, but he ate the glass. And he's gone playing in Paris now or in France now. So, if you expected that team to return to that form, you were deluding yourself a little bit. Obviously, you didn't expect it to be this bad, but you would be lying to yourself, as opposed to a UNC team that was widely picked as one of the teams that Duke is probably going to be the winner, but they could challenge. They could be a team that upsets the apple cart, and that has not happened.
We'll see what happens. We got 3 games tonight. SMU, very important game for them against Notre Dame tonight at 7. NC State against North Carolina at 7. I got my popcorn ready for that one. I'm going to be rooting for the Pack there. And then a late nighter tonight in Tallahassee, Miami taking on Florida State, which doesn't have tournament implications, maybe ACC tournament implications, you should say, because not everybody gets in this year. 3 teams are going to be left out of that dance. Huge thank you to everyone for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Make sure you check out Kenton on Locked On Wolfpack. Check me out at Locked On Canes. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.